not to prune? That's the question a lot of people ask this time of year. And we do indeed have a fairly small window for pruning certain shrubs around the landscape. Now I'm in our railway garden right now, and we have a dwarf pine that is in here to give us some large shrub effect and structure in the landscape, but it can quickly get out of hand if we don't prune it and prune it at a certain time of year. And the growth habit on needled evergreens is a little different than with deciduous trees. They have a very rapid spurt of growth for a very short period in the spring, and then these new shoots fall out and become the needles that you see on the tree. And so I can see right now, ahead of time, what the ultimate size and shape of this pine is going to be. Because the candles, or the new shoots that we call candles, have come up this tall, I know it's going to be this big, and that's getting larger than we want for the scale of it. Now, to keep a specimen pine such as this one in shape, whether you have a mugo pine or dwarf pine such as this, you want to go in the spring when the candles have pretty much extended their full growth and take a look at them and find the main candle in each cluster. For instance, right down here, we have about 6 small shoots and 1 main one. And back up here, we have 3 shoots, but there's an obvious one that's fairly dominant. Same way right here. And what you can do, these are very tender, is just go through and snap those off. Take them off. And what that does is that breaks that apical dominance in the terminal bud and enhances the growth of the side buds so that it will stay fairly short. Just go through and snap those off. It's called candle pinching, and it is a simple procedure, but it's one that if you do it too late in the season, you won't have as much effect on those side shoots. If you wait too late to take this main candle out, the side shoot growth will not increase like it should. So I'm just going to go through and take these off. And some of these are quite vigorous, and those you can pinch off as well. And if you have a pine that doesn't have real obvious central candles on it, and this shoot down here in front is an example of that, you can do just a little light trim back and take each candle back to about 1/3 of its growth, just like that, and that will help enhance the growth of the remaining ones. That way you've not completely taken that center one out, but you've nipped it back just a little bit. And that's something that you can do on most any pines. In fact, Christmas tree growers out in the field, that's one of their main chores on Christmas tree farms, is tree shearing to get that Christmas tree shape. And with Virginia pine and some of the other species that they deal with, they use a long knife and go along and shear many, many branches at a time. If they went around and picked over it like we're doing, they couldn't get through a field in any amount of time. That's not something you'd want to try at home. Just use some small shears or your fingers, and you can also keep your pines in shape. Well, over at the nursery barn, we have some broadleaf evergreens that we want to look at that have some very specific pruning requirements as well. But back here, I want to show you this boxwood. This is an example of how quickly we can recover from winter damage. Just a couple of weeks ago, the whole plant looked very unsightly. It had brown tissue, and we've been saying that that would overgrow, and indeed it has. Now, with broadleaf evergreens such as boxwood or privet, you can shear those several times a year to help hold their shape. But notice how quickly this has come back over the winter damage, and it looks just fine. Now, with azaleas and other broadleaf evergreens over at the barn, I want to show you how to prune those because they have far more exacting requirements than simple plants such as the boxwood. We've moved over to a very shady, protected area of the OBGA grounds because we wanted to show you some examples of things that even in the shade can use some pruning this time of year, and some that have winter damage. Right here is a spreading Japanese yew, and yews are one member of the narrow-leaf evergreens that can be sheared most any time. They don't have that narrow window that pines have. In fact, a lot of yews are used in landscapes and clipped all season long for topiaries, and if you've ever been to places like Walt Disney World and so forth, you may have seen that. Now this has a very spreading growth habit. This is the expansa cultivar of this particular Japanese yew, and it's meant to be open and spreading, so you really don't want to fight that too much. But if it is getting out in your way, you could prune these back without any harm at all. Well, let's take a look over here at some broadleaf evergreens that have been harmed by the winter. This is some Hinokarum azaleas, and these right here were really nipped back very badly by the cold. And it's very interesting that you look over here, there's one cultivar within that group that wasn't damaged too badly by the cold. However, the buds themselves were killed back, and so we're getting quite a bit of new growth coming out on this one. And azaleas in general should never really require pruning, but there are times in the landscape, such as with winter kill, or if they're growing up above the windows of your house, when you might want to trim them back some. But right here we've got pretty severe winter damage, and mostly any cutting that I do on this one is really just to investigate to see how severe the damage has extended back into the shrub. And so I'm just going to look over here and gradually cut back into the tissue. This right here is completely brown, so I'm going to go back a little further, and you want to do this very gradually because azaleas don't grow very quickly. Okay, I'm back to some green tissue now, and as this starts to leaf out, what we'll want to do is cut away the old dead wood. And with azaleas, all of their blooming comes on new wood, and so if you have any cutting back to do just for height control, of course you want to do it right after they bloom so that they have all season long to put on new growth and develop buds for next year, because that all happens the summer before flowering. But in cases of winter kill, wait until they start to leaf out and slowly clip back the dead tissue, and you might give them a light feeding of possibly a slow release organic fertilizer to encourage them to put on new foliage later in the season. But for now, that's really about all we're going to do, is just a little snooping around and investigating to see how much damage we may have sustained. Well, there are other broadleaf evergreens that are blooming this time of year. Some examples of others that you could be pruning right now would be the mahonias, and we have two species here that have just finished blooming, and they're putting out very lush new growth right now. And really, as with azaleas, they rarely need any pruning, but if you have plants like these that are up near your windows, you could give them a little nip right now without much harm and encourage them to branch out and not get too tall. Well, let's go out into the sunshine and look at some other spring flowering deciduous shrubs. They're a little easier to prune, a little easier to know when to do that. Well, we've taken a look at evergreens of different kinds, but what about deciduous shrubs? Now, with one like this, there's absolutely no question about where to prune it and how. Now, this is a weigela that went through the winter and was killed back pretty severely. There's a cultivar right next to it that did just fine, but looking at this one, it's pretty easy to tell when to prune it. It's just a matter of going in and going all the way down to the crown of the plant and cutting these branches back completely. And something I want you to notice after I get a couple of these out of the way is just how vigorous the new growth is. In fact, as we were standing around, we thought, is that really a weigela? Because the leaves were so large. But that's what happens when tissue on a plant is killed back and you have a big root reserve waiting to spring forth. And that's kind of the neat thing about when you do have some kinds of winter damage, is that even though we're sad about losing the top of this plant, take a look at how much growth is coming back, and it's rewarding to know that it wasn't completely killed back and we don't have to remove the shrub altogether. Now, a lot of this growth on here may need thinning out later in the season, but the main thing I want to emphasize is that weigela and forsythia and a lot of other shrubs that are spring flowering need to be pruned after bloom, except ones like this that have been killed back completely. And let me show you what I'm talking about. Over here on this weigela that was winter hardy, all of the flowers that are occurring right now are on growth that occurred last summer. And if we had pruned that back in March, if we'd gone out here and thought, oh, I'm going to tidy up my landscape, you would have lost all of that potential color and vibrance in the landscape. And so with shrubs like Weigela, you want to make sure that you wait until after flowering to prune them back completely. And let me show you what we're going to do on a forsythia that has completely finished blooming. Well, to our knowledge, this forsythia has never been pruned out here at the Botanical Garden, and it's really become tremendously overgrown. Now, hopefully you don't have a giant like this in your landscape, but there are techniques to get around this mixed growth habit that you see. We have a lot of old old dead growth in here, and that, of course, is the first thing that you want to take out if you're pruning a forsythia. The main thing I want you to notice, though, is the growth habit on here. Now, all these buds that you see right here are leaf buds. Those are going to leaf out and grow new branches, and later this summer form buds on them to bloom next spring. It's already done its flowering, that's over with, and so any pruning you do on here is not going to harm it. Keep in mind, though, that shrubs like this are meant to be large and arching over, and the main thing is to just cut out the old dead wood, leave the new, and allow it to have its natural form. If you don't want to do that, you can prune them back or hedge them back, but they'll always be a little bit boxy and really never have their main form. Well, I'm going to get back to work on this. The main thing is just stay after it, prune out the old dead wood, and make sure that the remaining canes have room to grow to produce buds for next year.